Turkey and Russia have important commercial ties. The most important which is that Turkey gets a significant amount of gas from Russia. There are also growing agricultural ties and other types of commercial ties. But the Turks have always looked upon the Russians with a certain amount of wariness, given the history of Russian-Turkish relations. Even before the Cold War that pitted Turkey on the side of NATO against the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, Russia and Turkey had clashed over many hundreds of years, and the Russians had always beaten the Turks. The Crimean Peninsula, at one time, was actually Ottoman territory. Now, relations between the countries were not bad before the Turks shot down a Russian warplane transiting very briefly over Turkish territory on its way to Syria. And then relations got quite bad. Russian President Vladimir Putin cut off those commercial ties between the two countries, made significant demands on the Turks in terms of owning up to it and apologizing to the Russians, and importantly, started to support Turkey's Kurdish enemies. Welcomed the opening of a Kurdish office in Moscow, and made all kinds of indications that he was going to put as much pressure on the Turks as possible. The Turks, after a number of months, decided that they did need the Russians, and they did not need the Russians to be supporting their Kurdish enemies. As a result, President Erdogan made a visit to Moscow to patch up ties between his government and that of Vladimir Putin. There was a very important practical issue associated with Erdogan's visit to Moscow. And that is because the United States, specifically the Obama administration, had decided that it wasn't going to intervene in Syria. It had essentially written itself out of the diplomatic efforts to resolve the Syrian conflict. As a result, the Turks needed to go to Moscow, given the fact that Russia is the main external player in Syria now. They had to go to Moscow to ensure Turkish interests in Syria. And primarily, that interest has changed. It once was the regime change in Syria. It's now ensuring that Syrian Kurds do not create a state or a statelet or an autonomous region in Syria that the Turks regard to be a terrorist state on its border.